Good afternoon. This is day 355 of Israel's multi-front war against the Iranian axis of evil and all of its terror proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and Syria, begun by the Iranian proxy Hamas on October 7th. Within the last week, we've been watching a new phase of this Iranian proxy war against Israel in the West unfold. Since October 8th, Israel's north has been constantly bombarded by missiles, rockets, and drones, leaving approximately 60 to 80,000 Israelis as internally displaced people within their own country. Over 9,100 rockets have been launched at the state of Israel. The attacks have killed more than 40 people, including the 12 Israeli Druze children who were murdered in Majda al-Shams. 190 million square meters of forests and farmland in northern Israel have been set aflame. Welcome yet again to another topical and timely AMET webinar. This war seemed to have begun last week, as you know, when the IDF blew up the pagers and beepers of Hezbollah members. As of yesterday, over 1,600 Hezbollah targets were struck in Lebanon, and dozens of rocket launchers and command centers have been destroyed. The IDF has taken out tens of thousands of missile launchers and their weapons in Hezbollah's arsenal. Yet Hezbollah continues to try to rain rockets down into Haifa, Afula, and northern Israel. Unlike Israel, which tells civilians to leave the line of fire, Hezbollah continues to target Israeli civilians. This morning, Hezbollah targeted the Mossad headquarters with a ballistic missile, which was intercepted by the David Sling. For the first time since 2006, Israel seems to be on the offensive against Hezbollah, whose mission, as you know, is the complete and total eradication of the Jewish state. Hezbollah, as you all know, uses mosques, schools, and homes to hide its missiles and weapons in living rooms, kitchens, and even children's bedrooms. The IDF is now preparing to send ground troops into Lebanon. In the meantime, we have an ongoing war in Gaza that seems to have obliterated a significant amount of the Hamas infrastructure there. And of course, Iran, through Jordan, has been smuggling weapons into Judea and Samaria. We are extremely honored to have with us today one of the world's foremost experts in this field. Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch is the director of the Palestinian Authority Accountability Initiative in the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. He has served for 19 years in the IDF Military Advocate General Corps. In his last position, he served as the director of military prosecution for Judea and Samaria. After retiring from the IDF, Colonel Hirsch worked as the head of the Legal Strategies Program for Palestinian Media Watch and as a senior military consultant for NGO Monitor, an advisor to the Minister of Defense, and head of the Advisory Committee in the Ministry of Interior. Colonel Hirsch was the architect of the Israeli law that stripped citizenship from Israeli terrorists who've been convicted for terror offenses, sentenced to a custodial sentence, and received a payment from the Palestinian Authority as a reward for their acts of terror or pay for slay. First of all, Maurice, it looks like in the last few days, rather than assuming a defensive posture, Israel is assuming an offensive posture. Can you tell us what Israel's objectives are now in this new phase of the war?
So, hi, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I completely deny the far too positive introduction. Not an expert. I know what I'm talking about. I'll try to share some of the limited knowledge that I do have. So what we're talking about now in the north is a whole different story, right? We've had this 11 months of the war of attrition with Hezbollah. Here we see this is a recurring pattern. In 2006, Hamas entered Israel, infiltrated Israel, killed 3 Israeli soldiers, and kidnapped Gilad Shalit. 25th of June 2006. 12th of July, Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah, enters into the fray to help their terrorist buddies in Gaza, and that kicked off the Second Lebanon War. Now, this time, he was even quicker to join. Immediately, the day after the October 7 massacre, Nasrallah, Hezbollah started attacking Israel. And what we've seen really for the last 11 months is this ongoing war of attrition. To a great extent, each side was happy to maintain certain boundaries, 10 kilometers in to Israel, 10 kilometers into Lebanon. And those were almost the agreed rules of the game. Obviously, that's completely distorted in its presentation, since on the southern border of Lebanon, it's predominantly filled with Hezbollah terrorists and a few local citizens as well. Whereas our northern border is mainly civilian settlements, yeshuvim, and towns and villages, and we have some 75,000 people who have now been evacuated from their homes for the last 11 months, running around the country. Israel hasn't been in the situation where we've had internal Jewish refugees. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Jewish refugees in Israel. We haven't seen that really since Israel's creation, and that's something that we've experienced when they join with the 65,000 people who were evacuated from the settlements and towns and villages and kibbutzim around Gaza. So we have 130,000 odd Israelis wandering around for almost a year with no home. And so within that framework, Israel was attacking Hezbollah. We've seen ups and downs in that almost, as I said, agreed framework. Hezbollah didn't attack too far. We didn't respond too far. And within that, we saw different developments. We saw the targeting of Hezbollah's senior leadership of different levels all the way along. Already by the end of July, we had about 350 Hezbollah terrorists who had been eliminated. Of them, around 50 of that senior level. I'm talking about the equivalent of brigadier generals and really upwards, commanders of substantial Hezbollah organs and units, and they had been attacked on the way. What we then saw from Hezbollah's side, and obviously the way that this is presented to the world is that Israel's the aggressor and Hezbollah's just this poor victim, as is Lebanon. That's certainly not the case. We didn't, as with Gaza, this wasn't a war that we asked for. It wasn't a war that we initiated. And Hezbollah has dragged us on all the way through. We saw about a month and a half ago, Hezbollah expanding the attacks further south. We saw already attacks on Tiberia, Rosh Pina, that area, and really Hezbollah challenging Israel that much more, and Israel trying to find the right balance as to what the response was. And whilst we were concentrating more on Gaza, trying to really free up the forces and not really escalate the situation in Lebanon. So that was good for Nasrallah. He got a free ride. He got to escalate. Israel was limited in its response. What can be bad? That's what these genocidal terrorists actually want. And so now we've moved into a different phase. It started with the beeper operation, really fantastic forward planning, months, if not years ahead, to identify all of these senior Hezbollah terrorists, to identify a common item that they would all carry and they could be identified with, and something that could be used against them. Really a a tremendous stroke of genius by whoever came up with that idea, and then to then operate it. Now, the reports that came out in Israel was that this wasn't the timing that we were necessarily looking for. We were waiting for a later time, but it appears that the devices had, or at least two of them had possibly been discovered, and so it needed to be operated. And obviously all this on the backdrop of what happened at the end of August. At the end of August, everyone will remember, Israel managed to eliminate Fuad Shukar, that basically the chief of staff of Hezbollah, the number 2 under Nasrallah, and so that really did start this ball rolling much more. The day after the beepers, the walkie-talkies, and then now with the Israeli Air Force a little bit freer from dealing with Gaza, attacking over the IDF reported today that there have been over 1,300 strikes, aerial strikes in Lebanon of the different targets, thousands of their rockets of different kinds being destroyed. Obviously, the focus for Israel, as harsh as this may sound, the focus for Israel is not the short-range missiles, because they tend to be the missiles that can cause possibly less damage, but rather the longer-range missiles, the ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles, which we know that they have. Today, from aerial pictures after one of the attacks, we saw Iranian rockets also on those sites. So we know Hezbollah has this massive arsenal, anywhere between 20 to 40,000 longer range rockets. I'm talking about 200, 250 kilometers to up to 400 kilometers. That means they cover Tel Aviv, even from the northern areas of Lebanon. And really that was the focus, going to the areas and to the ammunitions and the weaponry that can cause the most damage, and trying to eliminate that as quickly as possible. And I think that, as you mentioned, the strike this morning, I think it's a little bit dangerous to go with Nasrallah's narrative of things, saying, well, we were targeting Mossad headquarters in response to the beeper attack. As I think everyone knows, most of the military installations in Israel are unfortunately far too close to the civilian life. It didn't start that way. It wasn't planned that way. I served for many years in IDF headquarters in the middle of Tel Aviv. Everyone, I'm sure, knows the site adjacent to Sarona. When that site was built, that was the outskirts of Tel Aviv. And now the city has enveloped the headquarters. And so that's the situation that we found ourselves in. And so for Nasrallah, obviously, it's easy to say, no, I'm attacking a military target. For the last 11 months, he's been attacking civilian targets all the time. And to suddenly say, well, now I'm attacking a military target is quite outrageous. And so that's really where we are. The goal of there's a difference, just to answer your question, Sarah, the goal of the operation up north is very different from the operation down south with Gaza. In Gaza, we said very clearly the goals are: 1, bring about the freeing of the hostages; 2, destroy Hamas; 3, take away and ensure that Hamas never has a governance capability again in the Gaza Strip, and ensure that all of the threats to Israel's population are neutralized. In the north, our goals are very different. The cabinet has said it over and over again. We don't have this intention to topple Hezbollah. No one's interested in toppling Hezbollah. We're interested in crippling Hezbollah, taking away their ability and their desire to fight. But that's it. We're not coming to make a change. There's no people will possibly remember the deals between or the alleged deals for those who saw Waltz with Bashir and all of those things, and our history buffs of the first Lebanon war. There's no joining any other forces in Lebanon in order to bring about the downfall of the regime, because Hezbollah is the regime. Our goal is to ensure that we can allow our citizens, 65,000, 70,000 people, to return to their homes in safety without being under the constant threat of the genocidal terrorists shooting rockets and rockets, missiles, RPGs, anti-tank weapons at the houses adjacent to the border, at our school buses traveling with our kids to their schools. That's what we want. We just want to be able to live safely in our northern border. And that, I think, is the main goal of the operation in the north. That was the change that the government made recently to the goals of the war, including, for the first time, the duty and the obligation and the commitment to allow our citizens in the north to return safely home.
You would probably agree with me, Maurice, that most Israelis believe that this is an existential war. This is a war for your very survival against all of the Iranian proxies. But after 11 months of fighting in Gaza, how united is the resolve of the Israeli people, the will of the IDF, and does Israel have the munitions and capability to execute so many spheres of conflict simultaneously?
So I think those are two separate questions. I've also often said that our enemies looked at Israel leading up to the October 7 massacre and saw the division within the country, saw the demonstrations, and from their point of view, saw Israel as weak and divided, with officers, pilots saying that they wouldn't turn up to reserve duty if they were called, and really that very, very widespread arguments within Israeli society. And I would like to argue that they misunderstood the situation, because they look on from their Arab perspective and say, anytime you have that type of tremendous discussion and disagreement and demonstrations, it must be a sign of entire weakness within the country and division in the people. They missed the point, I believe. They missed the point that Israel is a vibrant democracy that can accommodate a very wide scale and very wide range of views and counter views and dissent. And I would have drawn the red line before refusing to serve in the army and dragging the army into that political debate. I don't think that was appropriate. But what the terrorists and the Iranians and Hamas and everyone else, I think, realized already on the afternoon of the 7th of October, it didn't even take more than that, was that whilst we have our internal divisions, arguments, complaints, counter arguments, we are united against our enemies. And in the tanks and in the fighting units in Gaza, you had every walk of life, the left wing and the right wing, the religious and the not religious, the Muslims, the Druze, the Christians, everyone sitting in the same metal box called a tank or an armored personnel carrier, and fighting side by side. There were no more divisions. There was a common goal. And I think too, whilst there are those that would like to present the divisions and the demonstrations to put pressure on the government to do more about freeing the hostages as undermining Israel's security, I think that our enemies should re-examine that hypothesis. We are united as a country in a way that I don't think that we have been probably for 60, 70 years. That's one of the maybe the side products of the war, of the massacre, that we realize that whilst there are and there were certain things that were important to us prior to October 7, our unity as a country, our ability to stand together and fight together and live together in peace is more important than those divisions at the moment. And so whilst we're at war, I believe that all of our enemies will find and meet a united Israeli society. Everyone, there's a music group called Tikva Shesh, if anyone's heard of them, who put out an amazing rap at the beginning of the war, talking about the Israeli society being these superheroes It doesn't matter what, one's a lawyer, one's a banker, one's a carpenter, one's in construction. They've all got their little set of uniform in their car. They've all got their little coffee making set in ready for camping or whatever it is. And as the command is given, they're there turning up. Some of them just volunteering before even called. And so that unity, I think, has been maintained throughout, even though there are, as I say, those who would like to try and undermine it. As regards the second part of your question, unfortunately, and I apologize if I offend any of your viewers, but I have to say that the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in is that we are dealing with a US administration that seems hell-bent on preventing Israel from doing what needs to be done with these genocidal terrorists, something which to me sounds, or I believe is entirely counterproductive for America's national security interests. It's not good to have genocidal terrorists running around murdering people and attacking and undermining the world and possibly bringing us to the edge of the abyss into a third world war. Had Israel been able to guarantee the unequivocal support of the US administration, providing us with all of the armaments that we need as we needed it, we would have been able to, I think, progress much more with the war in Gaza, even though our forces on the ground have done incredible work there. They've done things in an urban environment that no other army has done before, with speed and precision. And honestly, we could have done much better, much quicker, had we not had those restraints. And now it seems that we're in a deja vu also with Lebanon, with what appeared to be an announcement of the Biden administration that Israel should refrain from attacking infrastructure in Lebanon and refrain from really going all out on Hezbollah so that we can get to some type of political solution. Bad news for the Biden administration and for all of the people. There is no political solution with genocidal terrorists. If you don't beat them, then they will carry fighting on. And that's not something that we can tolerate. It's not something that I think Israel should be willing to accept. And so we do need that support. We need the support really of the American people telling the administration what they think is important. What's good for US, I believe, national security interests is a strong Israel that knows how to destroy genocidal terrorists. Because genocidal terrorists, once they're done with Israel, once Iran is allowed to develop into a nuclear threshold country, let alone having nuclear weapons itself, that is not good for the world order. And if Israel is held back and is constantly required to in some way concede to these genocidal terrorists, the message that the US administration is giving to the rest of the region is a message of weakness. How could Saudi Arabia tomorrow rely on the US administration to defend it against Iran if they're not unequivocally standing on the side of Israel, its greatest ally ostensibly in the Middle East? This is bad, I would argue, bad policy. And I believe it also doesn't reflect the views of the American population and the American people. And so it's hard to understand why that's good. If you want the war over quickly, provide us with the munitions that we need. We have done, and we always will take all of the precautions and act within the laws of war. Never mind what our detractors say. I would imagine South Africa at the Iranian behest will again be submitting another bogus, ridiculous charge to the ICJ that Israel is carrying out a genocide in Lebanon, and some other ridiculous garbage like that. But I think that the Western societies should really understand that Israel fights within the rule of law, within the laws of war, and it's America's best interest, Europe's best interest, and our best interest, and also in the interest of the Palestinians, to finish the war quickly. The more the terrorists, and even in Lebanon, the more the terrorists are allowed to hold Gaza and Lebanon hostage in their battle to try and eradicate Israel, the worse it is. And so that's I would like to believe that if we had sufficient support, and we do rely on the United States for that support, then we would be in a much better position.
Yes, as former Secretary of Defense Alexander Haig had said, Israel is better than our greatest aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. Israel is doing the fighting for all of Western civilization. Something that I would love to emphasize is that up until today, Ibrahim Akil, the head of Hezbollah's Radwan operations, is still on the Rewards for Justice program. This is somebody that Israel had just eliminated. He's the individual responsible for the murder of 241 U.S. Marines as they were asleep in their barracks in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983. Most of the Radwan training force and most of Hezbollah's top commanders have been eliminated, along with Mohammed Qassam al-Artar, the commander of the Radwan training force. This is something that, first of all, the United States should express some gratitude to the state of Israel for doing. There are many orphans and widows because of Ibrahim Akil. Have you heard any messages of support from the United States over this?
I don't believe that we've seen any messages of support for any of these targeted killings. Fuad Shukar, the chief of staff of the head of the Hezbollah army, was also involved in those same bombings of the Marine barracks in Beirut. And whilst there may have been an absence of a condemnation, that doesn't equate to a congratulatory move. When Osama bin Laden was taken out, that was a and I don't say this lightly, because obviously human lives are valuable, but when an arch terrorist is eliminated, it makes the world a better place. It makes the world a safer place. Ibrahim Akil, Fuad Shukar, Wissam al-Tawil, all of these people along the way, Madawi, if you remember the Iranian commander in Syria being eliminated, all of these people's deaths, whilst there are human beings, and obviously Judaism teaches that you don't rejoice in the downfall necessarily of your enemies. The absence of these people makes the world a safer place, and because of the high cost that these terrorists caused the US, that should be something which is certainly part of a congratulatory move, and an openly congratulatory. I was just for whatever reason or it is, reading just yesterday the U.S. Department of Defense's Laws of War manual. That's what sad lawyers do with their lives when they're bored. God forbid. And there was really an amazing sentence, which said the U.S. administration, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Military establishment changed its rules of engagements for overseas operations following the Beirut attack. So the elimination of these people is, I think, good. It's unfortunate to see some members of Congress not only not congratulating Israel, but condemning Israel for taking them out. We saw the same with President Macron in France, who, whilst these terrorists were also responsible for the deaths of over 40 French soldiers, he was mourning their elimination and condemning Israel for acting against them. Macron has certainly got his values all mixed up in his battle to try and placate his ever-growing far left audience and electorate, and that's just sad.
Have you heard or seen any reaction from the Iranian government to the news of these deaths?
So the Iranians really have been responding very interestingly. We see Khamenei tweeting out all types of bolsterous comments of their support for the Palestinians and their support for Hezbollah. Today, it appears that he too is going a bit senile. And today he tweeted out that the Palestinian resistance is winning, the Lebanese resistance is winning. Well, maybe you should go and visit Gaza and see what that means, that they're winning. Go and visit Lebanon, that you've now driven to a situation of war in this failed country that doesn't have electricity, that can't pay its bills, that can't return its debt, and see how that resistance is really faring. Israel has been struck, and no doubt they've really taken a very, very high price from Israel, both on the 7th of October and since. But in comparison to what Israel has managed to do to them, I think our damage is relatively small. And then we saw reports that Hassan Nasrallah was literally begging Iran to come into the fray to help and to attack Israel. And Khamenei responded by saying, yeah, this isn't the time. I mean, we've got to remember, whilst Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah is trying to turn Lebanon into another province of Iran, there's a very, as Dr. Harold Roeder explained a while ago, there's a very, these are Persians, these are Arabs. They might have that common goal, but the Persians will never lower themselves as in their opinion to go and fight for the Arabs. That's not something that they'll do. And we have to understand also that cultural and societal and really fundamental difference that there is between Iran trying to destroy Hezbollah and really operating everyone. But let's not forget, they are the others. I mean, Ayatollah Khamenei said a while ago, after Ismail Haniyeh was eliminated in Tehran, there were bigger declarations of a response, and we're going to attack Israel, and Israel will pay the price. So far, nothing. But a few days later, he did tweet out and say, let's just not forget, this war between Shia and Sunnah is still going on, possibly saying, let's not forget that Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas, are Sunnis. They're not like us, the Shia, and really we're fighting them as much as we're fighting the Jews. So let's not get carried away.
A point of correction on my part. One of our viewers, Stuart Sloan, wrote in that Jake Sullivan has openly supported Israel's elimination of Ibrahim Akil, the architect of the Marine barracks bombing. Thank you, Stuart, and I'm sorry that I missed that. And terms of what is going on now, apparently, besides the USS Abraham Lincoln, another aircraft carrier is going into the region, and the U.S. Has made the decision to bolster the 40,000 troops into the region. Of course, the Pentagon has called the new escalation, quote, a dangerous situation, and there have been warnings from the Biden administration that there's a potential for, quote, a wider regional conflict. Do you find the aircraft carriers and the submarine, the nuclear submarine sent from the United States to be a helpful sign, or a sign from the United States to Israel to restrain itself?
So it is unfortunately a mixed message. It's not necessarily a message of strength to the Iranians and to their proxies. We've seen what the Houthis have done also to the US forces and allied forces in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. They're not exactly deterred by them necessarily, and even when acting, the situation in Yemen against the Houthis is very unique in that the coalition forces there, led by the US, are actually acting under the authority and guidelines of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which is really the we are going to use force to eliminate, and so that's something which they haven't managed to do there anyway. So I'm not sure that necessarily deters the Iranians. I think it's there to almost give Israel a bear hug and say, you know what, you don't have to take care of all of these things. We've got your back. Unfortunately, what we see is that not only on the aircraft carriers come many F-15s and many soldiers, but they also seem to carry with them Amos Hochstein and this idea of a negotiated solution with these genocidal terrorists who have rejected every other attempt at mediation and persuasion until now. And so why would you think that they would change now? And if the deal breaker, the game changer, is Israel's growing use of force, well, then let us use our force and bring them to the point where we've changed the equation. That's really what we need to do here. We can no longer play, as I said in the opening remarks, within this realm of agreed rules. We need to change that equation with the genocidal terrorists.
So, speaking of Amos Hochstein, we've all read his ongoing reports. They seem to be even a little bit milder than UN Security Council Resolution 1701. And I'm hoping, that the objectives, I'm sure the objectives of the war will be met based on the precision and excellent performance of the IDF. But it looks as though the goal is not to totally eliminate Hezbollah. So this is a tough question. Are we just mowing the grass? Will Hezbollah reemerge and go down to the border once again?
So unfortunately, I believe that as long as Hezbollah enjoys the support of the Lebanese people, to whatever degree they do support them, and they do enjoy a lot of support in Lebanon, it will be a case of mowing the lawn. I mean, Israel, as I said, I don't believe that our goal is to obliterate Hezbollah. I don't think we have really that capability or arrogance to say that is a realistic goal of the war. And so I believe that Hezbollah, in one form or another, will possibly survive on another day. The question is, will the Lebanese people facing the destruction, whether they will be able to change something? So here, I'm sure many of the audience would know, the US actually, to this day, provides Lebanon with millions and millions of dollars to support the Lebanese army. Really a ridiculous idea that one Lebanese person will take up arms against Hezbollah in order to his countrymen, in order to defend Israel. I mean, that was the premise behind 1701. That's when that funding started. That really, that lie that we were sold, that here there's a political solution. 1701 was never implemented. After the Second Lebanon War, Hezbollah immediately breached its terms, and as it had no teeth and no consequences, it means that they could do whatever they wanted, and that's exactly what they did. And so there's no way to ensure that some type of a rehashed version of 1701, another great unanimous decision of the UN Security Council saying, don't worry, those Hezbollah genocidal terrorists, well, they won't want to kill you today. I don't think there's any reason why Israel should buy into that type of a lie. and I feel that the drive of the US administration to again say, well, Hezbollah is now willing to implement 1701 is really very short-sighted and guarantees that we will be going back into another cycle of violence in another 10, 15, 20 years. And so there are fundamental things which need to be changed. As long as the Ayatollahs sit in Tehran, Hezbollah will keep functioning. We have to understand that you have that octopus with its tentacles, and unless you can cut off the tentacles one by one, but unless you take off the head of the octopus, we're going to face this situation over and over again. And unless we want to see a nuclear threshold or a nuclear powered Iran, that's a threat that we need to deal with sooner rather than later. And so to avoid really doing a replay, a deja vu of this entire situation again in 5, 10, 15 years, we really do need to make strategic changes of policy, of ideas, and direction. I believe, and I believe that this is the time. I think the Iranians are somewhat weakened by the sanctions. They could have been more weakened had the sanctions stayed in place, and the last few years of prosperity for the terror regime has been unfortunate. But I think that's something that we can do, and this could be the window of opportunity.
As you know, the Iranian people, a vast majority, from what I can tell, are with us. We see them holding signs, forget Gaza, support us. Forget the Palestinians, support us. And speaking of the Palestinians, the administration has this idea that they want an invigorated Palestinian Authority to control Gaza, after Israel completes its mission. Can you say a few words about that?
So I have to say, there's none so blind as those who just won't see. The world, and I'll give you just one example, which is completely a demonstration of the situation. As the Biden administration started its governance, there were already reports in the New York Times, obviously, the mouthpiece of the Palestinian Authority, that the Palestinian Authority was going to reform its terror rewarding pay for slay policy. That was very clear. That was the first thing on the agenda. Obviously, no one can tolerate literally paying salaries to people for murdering Jews. That's just unacceptable. And so that was number one on the agenda. It's because of the Taylor Force Act, which conditions US aid to the PA on abolishing the pay for slay policy. It was a central goal of the administration and renewing their aid to the Palestinian Authority. And here we are, 4 years down the line, Mahmoud Abbas, who brought this terror rewarding policy to the forefront. He was the one who entrenched it in Palestinian law. It's not just an ad hoc policy. People should know it's a law with an entire governance system, with officers and clerks and really an entire mechanism that is solely devoted to incentivizing and rewarding terrorism. And so here we are 4 years down the road, and what can the Biden administration show? Absolutely nothing. So when you talk about a revitalized Palestinian Authority, and that's just a crazy word. What is a revitalized Palestinian Authority? My wife went to a masseuse recently, and she came out revitalized. What does it mean to revitalize the Palestinian Authority? What are you going to give Mahmoud Abbas, the 89-year-old dictator, a massage, and then he'll feel better and stop wanting to murder Jews and stop wanting to reward Jews? Everything they've done all the way through is indicative of their policies, of their commitment to the destruction of Israel, to sowing more and more violence. their rejection of every peace offer along the way, and to now say that we're looking for a revitalized Palestinian Authority really is just saying we're dead set on ensuring that the Palestinians continue living under dictators. I mean, there hasn't been elections in the PA for the last 19 years. Mahmoud Abbas is in his 20th year of his first 4-year term. Like, imagine what happened on the 6th of January. Donald Trump allegedly trying to take over Congress and cancel the elections and destroy American democracy. Well, that's exactly what Mahmoud Abbas has done. He was elected in 2005 for a 4-year term, 20 years on, no elections in the middle, and he's still there. And he's still accepted as this world leader running around as if he's another one of the liberal Western democratic leaders, and yet he's not. And so what do you have? The revitalized Palestinian? What is the Palestinian Authority today? I mean, that's the question that we need to ask. It has nothing to do with Gaza, right? Because, oh no, we have nothing to do with Gaza, says Mahmoud Abbas. It's only Hamas there. They're the crazies, but we want to rule it. But what about Jenin? What about Shechem? Why aren't the also US-funded Palestinian security forces fighting against the terrorism in Samaria? Or why didn't the security coordination flag the car bombs that were created, that were built in Hebron and then sent to explode in the Israeli Yeshuvim, in the Israeli settlements? Where is all that security coordination? $60 million a year, no product. And it's incredible that the US administration can again look in and say, whilst all of our efforts for the last 30 years have completely failed to bring about good governance, democratic governance, a rejection of terrorism, a halt to the pay-for-stay terror reward program, now if we just give them more money and they say that they're revitalized, then that'll be okay. Why would you buy into that?
So, Colonel, if you had your druthers, do you believe, as I do, that there is absolutely no alternative to having Israel at least maintain a presence around the periphery of Gaza, including the Philadelphia corridor, as well as the border of Lebanon, and not depend on UNIFIL and the Lebanese armed forces in Lebanon?
Without question. We have never been able to rely on international forces, international observers, international armed forces and observers and unarmed forces. And you just have to look back at what happened after the Sinai campaign in 1956. UN advisors and enforcers sent into the Sinai. When the Egyptians were fed up with them, they just threw them out. In Lebanon, Hezbollah ignores UNIFIL, and UNIFIL really isn't willing to fight them, and doesn't even have the mandate to really fight them. So who are these international forces that are going to fight for Israel against the terrorists when they risk their own lives? It doesn't exist, and therefore we can only depend on ourselves. The Philadelphia corridor has been clearly exposed as the conduit of oxygen, of funds, of weapons, of everything through Egypt knowingly. Let's put that on the table. Sisi knows what's going through the tunnels from Egypt into Gaza, and have been knowingly arming the genocidal terrorists. We cannot rely on anyone else but ourselves, and we need to ensure that that is what happens both in the south and in the north, and that we don't allow ourselves to be drawn into illusions of others promising all types of defenses which we simply can't rely on.
Right. One of our viewers asked if there's any hope for a two-state solution, or are we destined to eternal war. And this is a very tough follow-up question he asked. What will Israel do with the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza and the 2.5 million in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, if you will?
Okay, so the two-state solution, I've got good news for everyone. The two-state solution is a truly viable option. It can guarantee peace for the entire region for many years, and it's actually already been implemented. The two-state solution was created by the Mandate for Palestine in 1922. It separated the Jewish country from the river to the sea for the Jews, and the Arab country from the river to the Iraqi-Iranian borders. It's called Jordan. What we're talking about now in modern day terms, when you're talking about the two-state solution, it's really the two-state delusion. There is no chance of another state to the west of the Jordan River. I would just beg that people would listen to what the Palestinians are saying. They are not interested in a two-state solution. They don't see or recognize Israel in any borders whatsoever. When they argue and push forward with this idea of even the Arab peace plan, so agreed and will recognize Israel, read the small print that says, as part of the Arab peace plan from 2002, the return of all the refugees. That is a code word for saying we're going to flood Israel demographically with 6 million Palestinians and destroy Israel democratically. Because you can't have a situation where you have 5 million Arabs already here, another 6 million to come in. There's only 7 million Jews. And how can Israel remain a Jewish democratic country? And so when you read that fine print, it really is this idea of a two-state solution is an idea invented by Yossi Beilin and Shimon Peres, ever the dreamers, unfortunately, as opposed to true visionaries. They just had their heads in the clouds and no basis on the ground. And they didn't listen to the Palestinians. They didn't listen to Yasser Arafat when he immediately said after the signing of the Oslo Accords that he sees the Accords as nothing more than the Hudaybiyah Accords that Muhammad signed and then quickly after breached. Listen to what the Arabs are saying. We must stop with this almost patriarchal. I sometimes argue even racist approach that says we can tell these Arabs what they really think. Listen to what they're thinking. They don't want a two-state solution, and so it really is a delusion. The problem, everyone should know the history. Ben Gurion back in 1948 accepted the two-state solution or the three-state solution. Jordan, another Arab country, and a smaller Israel. It was the Arabs who objected to it. There's an unbelievable UN document from 1951 discussing the findings of the trilateral committee that was set up after Israel's War of Independence. And really, what I argue is that from that document from 1951 till today, nothing has changed. In that document, Ben Gurion suggested the following: that the Arab countries recognize Israel in the boundaries of the armistice lines, right? Judea and Samaria will not be part of Israel. Give us Gaza, said Ben Gurion, and we will give all of the people there equal Israeli citizenship, right? Like, imagine what would happen and how things would have developed had the Arabs accepted Ben Gurion's offer. And it's not me; it's a UN document that spells it out. The Arabs, on the other hand, said, "We reject any type of recognition of Israel. You will first allow all of the refugees to flood Israel again, and then we'll discuss whether you have a right to exist." And really, nothing has changed since then until now. I think the Abraham Accords possibly changed some of that paradigm, but from the point of view of the Palestinians, the Iranians, the Lebanese, the Syrians, nothing has changed. And so really there is no discussion of what it can be. As regards to what to do with the people, really I think there needs to be creative solutions suggested. I did some work also with the IDSF, the Bitronistim, and we wrote a document on special ideas of sovereignty that are applied around the world. What about adopting something like Puerto Rico with America? They're U.S. citizens, but they can't vote for the presidency. But they can come. They come to the mainland, then they can come. What about there are 66 different special regimes of sovereignty around the world where one group of people belong to another country, but really are, I won't say second-class citizens, but have lesser rights than the other citizens. There are many, many, many ideas that can be invented here. I was just talking about this today with someone. Well, he asked me, well, what are you going to do about these people and their passports? What passports will they hold? With all due respect, that's my problem. Did I make them stateless? They could have stayed in Israel. They would have enjoyed passports until this day. When Jordan invaded Judea and Samaria, Jordan annexed it and said, "You're all now my citizens." Jordan then revoked their citizenship. So Israel had nothing to do with that. Israel didn't make these people stateless. And we shouldn't be the ones who are required to find a solution. Give them Jordanian citizenship and salamat, as they say in Arabic. It's all good. The Egyptians want the Gazans, their brothers in arms. And from 1948 to 1967, they didn't want them. They held Gaza under military rule, no chance of any type of integration. So this isn't a problem that Israel created, and Israel shouldn't alone be required to find the solution to it.
Beautiful. Okay. I think there's time for a couple of further questions. One question I want to ask you is, how are Israel's quote unquote Arab allies, frenemies from the Abraham Accords reacting to this new initiative in Israel's north?
So I think it's a little bit early to tell. You have to take into account that there is unavoidable political dynamics. Bahrain, for example, who is, I think, a solid and invested member of the Abraham Accords, is actually at the moment the rotating head of the Arab League. So what do you expect for them to say? Can they be torn into that situation where they're going to vote against the entire Arab League that they're now heading in order to support Israel? And if you asked me, I would say absolutely yes. That's what it means, signing a peace accord. It means that you're ceasing your hostilities towards Israel, and at least are looking at things in a more objective point of view. But to say that that's going to be exactly what's going to happen, I think is far from the truth. And to an extent, we need to be able to understand that. I think that the step taken by the Abraham Accords countries to stop allowing the Palestinian leadership to hold the entire Arab world hostage was a brave step taken. It wasn't land for peace; it was just peace for peace. And even if we do see possibly the more vocal stance against Israel, I think the undercurrent is very, very clear. Trade between the Abraham countries, Accord countries, and Israel, even since October 7, has not been tremendously affected, more than what would be expected because of the war. And that, I think, is a sign of really the strength of the Accords, the strength of the bond that was created, and sometimes just allowing these background noises to be ignored is really the course that we need to take.
Wonderful. As you know, Amit is on Capitol Hill. In fact, I am about to leave rather soon to join my wonderful colleagues, Joseph Epstein and Eilat Israeli, to meet with a wonderful Congressman, Richie Torres. We know that, especially during these difficult times, our members of Congress rely on us to really share with them what we know as the facts, And we're asking all of you to please support Amit. We are on the front lines daily, trying to provide members of Congress with accurate information and analyses for the critical policy decisions that they have to make. And I also would love to plug our dinner, which my wonderful associate colleague Lily Hoover is plugging right now, where we will be honoring the magnificent Musab Hussein Yosef, the son of a founder of Hamas, Shabbos Kestenbaum, who is suing Harvard University for its prolific atmosphere of anti-Semitism, from both professors and colleagues, pairs, and Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, whom you recall from the hearing when she put presidents of major universities on notice, two of whom have resigned, and Congressman Jared Moskowitz. So we are looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible that night. It is our one fundraising event of the year, and we hope to see you there. And we're truly honored to be able to have Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hurst with us today from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much, Maurice. Your thoughts and your analyses are really enlightening and thought-provoking, and we really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much.